The Post is a great watch with just a pinch too much nostalgia, writes Peter Howell. The Post, starring Meryl Streep, Tom Hanks, Bob Odenkirk, Tracy Letts, Alison Brie, Bruce Greenwood, Michael Stuhlbarg and Carrie Coon. Directed by Steven Spielberg. Opens Friday at the Varsity. 116 minutes. PGTHE Post is a Steven Spielberg movie about a woman finding her voice, a newspaper finding its spine, and a nation finding out that its leaders lie. That's a heavy dramatic load for one film, but it's no impediment to the director. He gallops like Paul Revere on that momentous night ride, keeping Janusz Kaminski's camera frequently in motion and his own intentions always plainly evident. Article continued below. Playing both storyteller and sermonizer, and doing both well, Spielberg seeks to address current fears about White House malfeasance with an inspirational history lesson from 1971 about how the press exposed and outfoxed a bad president. It sounds like All the President's Men, and the film does have a common link with that 1976 Watergate drama, The Washington Post newspaper and its pugnacious editor Ben Bradlee, with Tom Hanks heartily assuming the role made famous by the late Jason Robards, who won an Oscar for his gruff performance. The Post functions as a prequel to All the President's Men, since its account of publishing the explosively confidential Vietnam War documents known as the Pentagon Papers, and the subsequent right-to-print courtroom battle, leads directly into a subsequent Watergate skullduggery. The woman mentioned above, Washington Post publisher Katharine Graham, was acknowledged only in passing in All the President's Men, in a vulgar threat made by one of Richard Nixon's stooges. She's the virtuous front and center of the Post, played by Meryl Streep with Oscar-wooing authority as a leader for whom greatness is thrust upon rather than sought. Streep is the ice to Hanks' fire, and it's incredible to think this is the first time they've appeared together in the same film. We've grown so accustomed to politicians fibbing to us, especially a certain tweeter-in-chief, you may wonder why Spielberg even bothers to point it out. Yet there was a time when people held governments and politicians to higher standards. Spielberg summons us to remember why that mattered. Scripted by Liz Hanna with spotlights Josh Singer, The Post has added appeal for print journalists. It rekindles fond memories of those halcyon days when the hottest stories were delivered not by a finger tap on a cell phone screen but by the thud of a load of newspapers at curbside and doorstep. In truth, there may actually be little too much journo nostalgia in the Post, for people for whom ink doesn't flow in the veins. There are more than a few on-the-nose testimonials to the virtues of fearless newspapering. Such as when Bradlee thunders, the only way to protect the right to publish is to publish, in the face of a court challenge that could push the cash-strapped Washington Post into bankruptcy and land Bradlee and Graham in jail. Spielberg frequently unleashes his inner Frank Capra, a career-long temptation. He goes in for such cornball character tropes as a nervous newshound, Bob Odenkirk, dropping dimes at a payphone, and a sweet little kid selling lemonade to sweaty scribblers, making a tidy profit on the side. He draws out Graham's uncertainty about risking Nixon's wrath to the point that it almost becomes counterproductive, risking making her appear as a victim of history rather a catalyst for it. She's frequently dressed in fancy attire, having abandoned one social event or another in order to deal with the messy matter of saving democracy. Streep's strength and innate dignity keep parody at bay. Watch how she quietly clears pushy men at her home office, and reminds Bradlee that her friendship with McNamara is no more scandalous than his was with JFK. Spielberg presents vast amounts of information with efficiency and authority. The picture opens in Vietnam in 1966, as a squirrely Defense Department contractor named Daniel Ellsberg, Matthew Rhys, finds out firsthand in the bloodied battlefield that the war is unwinnable. He tells the bad news to Defense Secretary Robert McNamara, Bruce Greenwood, who grimly agrees, but that's not what McNamara tells the press. We're very encouraged. In every respect we're making progress, he lies. A flash of real-life news footage reveals how this fiction has been peddled not just by the odious Nixon, but by a succession of past presidents, Johnson, Kennedy, Eisenhower and Truman. In a few deft scenes, Spielberg sets up not only Ellsberg's disillusionment, and his subsequent leak of the Pentagon Papers to the New York Times and later the Washington Post, but also our own investment in the holy cause of getting every last fact and fib onto ink tree pulp as quickly as possible, the consequences be damned.
We may not always know who is doing what, as supporting characters played by the charismatic likes of Tracy Letts, Alison Brie, Michael Stuhlbarg, Carrie Coon and Jesse Plemons charge across the screen. But with Spielberg at the helm and fully invested in the story, we can count on the movie equivalent of a great read, which is high praise in newspaper journalism. It's a great watch. Read more about United States.